Let's make a ready deck. All unnecessary personnel clear the flight deck and catwalk areas. Those personnel remaining get in a complete flight deck uniform. Get your helmets on, buckled, sleeves rolled down, and goggles down.
Get those goggles, will you?
Okay, get them moving. Get them moving.
Check the chocks, tie downs, fire bottles, tow bars, and unreleased gear back to deck.
Hello, and welcome to the F-14 Tomcat radio show. Tomcats on the ball.
Followed by Tomcat ball 6-0.
Roger ball.
Welcome to the official F-14 Tomcat radio show podcast, straight out of Calverton, where all 712 airframes were built. I'm the show's producer. My name's Lorenzo. I want to thank you all for joining us. We have a killer show tonight. We have joining us Commander Brian Roberts, call sign RJ. Welcome aboard, sir.
Thank you.
Also joining us, familiar face, Lieutenant Commander John Oneill, call sign CHIMPO. Good evening, sir.
What's going on, guys? Good to be back.
We have a great show tonight. We're going to talk keg paddles and the platform on the boat, what actually takes place there. These guys are all distinguished careers. LSO is their thing. Also, SYPHIN and RJ have some green ink, and we'll get involved with that later, what that exactly means. So back in 31, in the good old days. So
that's what we're calling it these days.
Joining us, as your host, as always, up front, is Jerry LEEKSTER, call sign. Joining us up front, your host, call sign LEEKSTER, is Jerry Leekey. Good evening, sir.
Hey, happy to be here. Thanks, Lorenzo.
Sitting in the back, with a big smile on his face, is SYPHIN Lieutenant Commander Eric McMullen. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. It's a joy.
Take it away, guys.
I was going to say, RJ, CHIMPO, it is awesome to have you guys. CHIMPO, good to have you back. And RJ, man, it's been too long, so it's good to see your face. I know not everyone will see your face, but it's good for me to see your face.
You as well, my friend. It's been way too long.
So as Lorenzo mentioned, we've got some time together in the jet, which is always cool. LEEKSTER's had some guys on the show who he's had some time with in the jet, which is it's a cool combo. So I'd love to start with kind of how you got to the Tomcat in the first place. Tell us why Tomcats, how'd that come around for you?
Well, I think it started with a small independent flick in 1986. You guys might remember that, maybe that one. Yeah, so my dad was a lawyer.
I've never heard of it. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Check it out. My dad was a lawyer, so my grandma, who was really awesome, she took us to see all the cool movies. She took us to see, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Silence of the Lambs. And she said, all right, what do you guys want to go see this day? And my brother said, I want to go see Top Gun. I'm like, no, that sounds stupid. I want to go see Legal Eagles.
Oh, yeah.
So we went and saw Top Gun. And I was like, I want to do that. So somehow this California boy ended up going to the Naval Academy, got into flight school, and did well enough to get my first choice, which was Tomcats, because it sounded like it was a big, sexy airplane. And honestly, a lot of it, the reason I got into it was all the truly great instructors going through training command in both Meridian and Kingsville were the Tomcat guys, particularly the LSOs. I'm like, those are the guys I want to be like. So it seemed to be the community that I really want to fly. I knew the writing was on the wall. That airplane wasn't going to be around forever. And it's like, why not fly something that's a legacy, something that's a little more manual flying, more skill required, which appealed to me. So ended up, getting first in my class, got up to VF-101 in 1998, and then flew the Tomcat right up to the bitter end with you.
That's awesome. Yeah, even in 97, I remember hearing that eventually the Tomcat was going away, but we didn't know exactly how soon. I think we were all kind of a little surprised when we heard that sunset was happening in 06.
Yeah.
So, yeah, certainly wasn't a bad career choice, and obviously we loved being there, so there's that.
Yeah, so started out my career in the F-14A, so I actually got to fly all three models of the Tomcat, which is pretty awesome. Yeah. So first two cruises with the Checkmates in 211. So during Operation Southern Watch, and then obviously deploying and surging right after 9/11. So pretty interesting cruise there. And then was a guest instructor with the F-101, so I got an instructor in the Tomcat too, and then joined you guys for the CAG Paddles cruise.
Yeah. How long were you with 101 as an instructor?
I was only there for about 16 months before I got picked up for a CAG Paddles job.
I gotcha.
So very short tour.
Yeah, seriously, seriously short. So you were there like what, 03 time frame?
02 to 04.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. Yeah, I remember you were there, but you weren't instructing in the D, at least when I was there. So. No,
I ended up not flying the D till towards the end, but I was a class advisor for a lot of the guys that ended up in 31. So like Bunny and his whole class, I was their class advisor.
Yeah. And then you wanted him to be a paddles too, so that worked out nicely.
Yeah.
So when you went through the RAG as a student, did you fly the A and B, or did you fly you just flew the A?
Yeah,
so you knew you were going to an A squadron, so they put you in the A, you go out and you do 2 deployments on that, and then you come back to the RAG and you finally get to strap on the B.
I'm like, where have you been all my life?
That's exactly right. It's quite an eye opener, that first flight, and that with the big motors.
You don't hear that iconic. I had a dual compressor stall and do a dual flame out on my tactics flip flop hop at VF-101. That was a very quiet couple seconds in that airplane.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah, TF-30s, Pratt & Whitney Pendle engines.
That's my favorite patch that I have on my jacket. Yeah, because I also experienced a dual compressor stall, dual flame out, and when both generators go offline and all the hydraulics, it's an interesting moment.
Yeah, big angry OB O'Brien in my back seat, because that was one of
OB.
the flights where it required a pilot in the back seat. When I finally got power back on, I was like, all right, the right's coming back online, left should be coming back shortly. And he says, let's go home.
Yeah.
Let's do that. I concur.
Yeah.
I can see the maintenance right up in my head. Checks 4.0 on deck. We drain the traps, and it's ready to go.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with these engines whatsoever.
So you go fly the B in the RAG, and you got to dogfight it. And what did you think about that experience?
So the B was what I'd always dreamed the Tomcat was going to be. I'm not going to lie and say, actually, my first flight in the F-14A, I was a little underwhelmed by the power in it. I didn't think that it was quite what I thought it was going to be until you get up high and going fast. On takeoff, it's like, well, this is kind of a little bit piggish. But then once you got it airborne and got it going fast, then you got used to it. And it was one of those airplanes that really honestly made you a better pilot, because you had to learn energy management. And I flew the automated flight controls before we got the digital flight controls. So I was one of the last classes to CQ in the old automated flight controls. So it honestly made me a much better pilot. When I got to the B, I was absolutely overwhelmed with how much power and thrust was in that. It was truly a machine. And I remember my second flight in the B was with the upgrade with the heads-up display. And I'm on the catapult, only my second flight in this airplane, and the heads-up display was stuck like 45 degrees nose down. And Maria was like, hey, we're down. We can't take this flying. I'm like, what are you talking about? I've got airspeed and altitude and stuff. This is way more than I used to. We're going. So I think my first 30 traps in HUD-equipped Tomcats, including the D, I just turned the HUD off. And then I quickly learned, it's like, no, this is much better.
Wait, you want the HUD? And actually, do I recall that the B HUD is actually bigger than the D HUD?
It was a little bit bigger, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, the B was especially slightly lighter than the D. It was a great airplane to fight, great airplane to fly around. Didn't get a ton of hours in it before I joined 31 and 213 for the CAG Paddles tour, and then flying exclusively the D with those guys, which still to my day, the D is the favorite airplane I've ever flown.
Yeah, I hear guys we've had a bunch of guests on here that have done, not a bunch, we have several who have flown all three, and we've got quite a few guys that did the A to B transition as well, and they say the same thing, that they're all amazed how much better an aircraft it was when they finally got to do it. But I just don't have that experience. All I ever flew with the D, so I not that I want to go backwards, but honestly for me, I think about what those differences were, and I guess I'm thankful that I got the D experience that I got without anything to compare it to. So tell me, like, for you, when you finally flew the D, what was the most, I don't know, the most useful thing that was different?
Can I just jump in real quick and just say on a Grumman side of things, that's that B is the airplane that it should have always have been off the line. Yeah. That's sad, but I mean, I'm glad you guys appreciate that. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I mean, I will say one of my greatest feats in the A was, the fact that it was my first cruise and I got a guns kill in a 1v1 set against the F-14 guy who wrote the Top Gun BFM chapter. Because it just ended up being, one of those days where you have a good fight. Every pilot's got good days and bad days when it comes especially to BFM. But the thing that really made the difference in the B and the D was the ability to go up and the energy addition, which you just didn't have in the A.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I think it was a clear, the fight in an A is always a nose down.
Yeah.
You get one nose up turn to get to cornering, and then you're either in a looping fight or you're in a nose down spiral to a luftberry kind of thing. And the B, once you got between 10 and 15,000 feet, if you're in blower, you had to have the nose up or you're going to arc. So in my opinion.
Yeah, a trick I learned from your old XO skipper Puck Howe was especially you could put the flaps all the way down in the D, and you're just going to climb to the moon, ahead of any Hornet, and then be able to come back down and get on them with no problem.
The Hornet could never get the nose up that high, and once you bled them down, you could always, once he was beat up, then you could try to drag him uphill, and you're always going to be at the advantage at that point.
Yeah, and I mean a lot of other cool things, with the Erst in it too. I remember, I was flying one of your jets there, SYPHIN 31, and doing some testing because the Raptors at first just got to Langley.
We talked about it a few shows ago. Was that I must have flown that with you?
Probably. They were all pretty pissed off that we had some weapons quality queuing on the Erst there. It's like no, you didn't. Yeah, we did. Everything puts out heat.
Especially skin friction heat, yes.
So that airplane with the capabilities of Link 16 with the Erst, with everything in it. Part of it too is it may have been the fact that we had the last two squadrons. We had really great part support, and the jet reliability was fantastic on that cruise overall. So,
I remember at least once, I think even one of our flights together, we super spared and we went for a Hornet. That was pretty awesome.
We did. That was awesome. Yeah.
So, what is your RJ? What do you think about landing that on the ship that between the A and the? I guess you didn't get a whole lot of traps in the B. When we transitioned from the A to the B, guys had a little bit of difficulty with the throttles, and I'm not sure if they fixed that or just they weren't quite linear, as you added power. So it would take some strange throttle movements in the B compared to the A. I don't know if the D was like that or not.
The B and the D were very similar, and I would say the biggest way to say it is it's a very small sweet spot, for that. So the throttles, you have to be very, very gentle with the range of motion. And once you kind of found the right on speed, with it, you're largely flying a lot more DLC and influencing that. The A, there's a fair amount more power movement required of the throttles to kind of fine tune it. I got good at flying the A and eventually got, better at flying the D, but it was real easy to get overpowered in the B and the D, fair amount of bolters. The nice thing about them, though, is you could dig yourself out of a bigger hole than you could in the A. I mean, there was a point in the A where there's just nothing that could be done. There's some pretty iconic ramp strikes out there. In fact, my boss at ATAC, Mother Hubbard, was waving that iconic 213 ramp strike on the Lincoln, and he's got the scars to proof from the fan blades that hit him on that one. So it's just one of those airplanes where once you made that bad power off correction, there was nothing you could do to overcome it. The B and the D, you could dig yourself out of a hole.
Mother is a naval aviation legend.
Yeah, he is.
And frankly, it would be awesome to have him on here and talk about that, waving that, not that specific pass, but his experience in general in naval aviation.
He got some Tomcat time. He's on his way out to Point Magoo right now to go fly a Kafir out there tomorrow. So.
One of the last times I saw him, he was flying a Hellcat at the Reno Air Races, so he's flown everything.
we were just down in JAXA. In fact, I let him back in the Kafir back here to Newport News today. So true legend.
So back to the land and the D. Did you use the velocity vector and the energy cue, or was that too much information, or what's your impression?
So like I said, about my first 30 traps in the HUD equipped Tomcat, it was too much information. Coming from the A background with the look down VDI, that you had to put either the night filter on or the MVG filter on that would inevitably pop off on a cat shot. So there was a lot to incorporate, but once you started incorporating it, especially I think the power carrot was probably to me one of the more useful tools.
Yeah.
Kind of judging that energy state of where it's going to go, which when we actually first started in the Super Hornet, that was one of the things a lot of Tomcat guys were like, we really want a power carrot pack. And the Hornet guys like, no, we don't need this. They finally did get it and incorporated it in the Super Hornet after a couple of years.
It's for folks who are not familiar with that, on the heads-up display and sometimes on the attitude reference, you have an energy predictor, or basically it shows you the energy state of the airplane, and it'll show you if you're accelerating or adding energy before the airspeed indicator will show that, or before angle of attack.
Yeah.
And as a pilot, you can use that, especially for landing on a carrier, to make your power adjustments before an actual pedostatic instrument would show a change in airspeed. And we have them in airliners now, and I find it incredibly useful, especially in like crosswind landings and stuff like that. You can see energy coming off the machine before you even see it on any other instrument. So I think
Absolutely.
it's a really useful tool, to be honest.
Hugely valuable. And one of the other neat things about the D in particular was the Mode 1 Delta. So when you're coming in for a ACLS approach to the ship, you had a flight director mode, which gave you not just, the information for where the ACLS was and where you need to capture it. It was also kind of a tilting display, kind of a TV box that if you put your velocity vector in that box, and it would also kind of give you an angle of bank cue. So, hey, I can kind of match all this symbology to really square myself away to get to a great, in the middle to enclosed position. So that if guys were good at that, I was never one of the ones that was truly good at incorporating all that. But guys like Stufflebeam and a couple other guys really like that Mode 1 Delta. And that symbology I thought was actually unique and very useful. I haven't seen it in any other airplanes.
Wow.
Yeah, I think I remember you actually was the guy that told me about. We didn't normally bring up the HUD repeater in the backseat on the GD because it wasn't all that helpful for the stuff we had. But I remember one flight you told me about the power cord. I'm like, oh, I'm going to watch that. And I remember noticing that actually helped me be a better co-pilot for you and others, because I could have an indication. Okay, do I need to start calling our rate of descent a little more because I'm seeing it in the power carrot already? And I remember that being a good co-pilot help for the backseater as well. So that's useful.
It's a VSI potentiometer.
Yeah.
I was one of those guys who loved VSI calls from the rear cockpit, especially coming from the heads down A. And I still incorporated it and did it in the D. But with that, it was a great way to see where your rate of descent was going to go before it actually started going there.
I was an airspeed guy. It's funny that you say that, because everybody's, there was always like, how can you use your Rio to help you land on the ship at night? Usually at night, No,
you can just stop that question. How can you use your Rio?
And some guys, they don't want their Rios to say anything because it's distracting. And
Puck was that guy. Puck plotted nothing. He's like, shut up in the back seat.
And other guys, are so wired and jacked up on adrenaline that you could probably be talking, but the audio exclusion associated with that adrenaline, they weren't going to hear you anyways. And then some guys, hey, I want a VSI. And I personally liked airspeed. I knew that if he said you're 1 knot slow, and then I heard 2 knots slow, 3 knots slow, I know that the airplane's about to settle. So I better, you'd hear that trend of airspeed, and, but yeah, I get it. That's those Rios really helped a lot in that regard, at least for me.
And they're just looking at the steam gauges, right? I mean,
yeah.
Oh, wow. Because that's, not real easy on a steam gauge to see 1 knot slow.
Yeah, well, they're telling you a trend, and you as a pilot are flying the glide slope, with the throttle theoretically. But if you start to settle, your natural tendency is to pull back on the stick. You don't even know you're doing it, But the aircraft is changing, and you may not see an indication on the angle of attack yet, a change in color on the angle of attack indicator on the.
Or the Tomcat nose down and close, just kind of that natural tendency to want to lower that nose and go fast.
But as an LSO, we'll talk more about this later, but as an LSO, you could actually see the airplane decelerating from the outside, from the distance of the horizontal stabs to the bottoms of the flaps. So we would look at that space in between there, and if you saw that space getting bigger, the guy was decelerating. And if you didn't see smoke coming out of the motors on an A, you knew, or you didn't hear him adding power, you knew he was about to settle. So you could already be ahead of the airplane and give him a little sugar call, a little power, and help him stay on the glide slope.
And it's a very distinctive whining sound when a guy put the power back too far. It was absolutely unmistakable from the platform.
Yeah.
So tell us, we were talking earlier, you had a couple stories of some interesting stuff that you saw from the platform and while you were in a squadron, I believe.
Yeah. So from the pilot perspective, probably one of my more interesting passes behind the ship was my first deployment. I'm manning up the night airborne respot, and we had a CAG, Sperm Sherman, who wanted to set a record for the most number of traps ever on a 6-month deployment. So we were doing blue water bag X's at night. Now, so this is the middle of January, and we're in the Northern Pacific, 680 miles from land or something like that. There's no divert, and and I'm not lying. It was literally plus or minus 30 feet of pitching deck, so 60 feet of deck motion. It was literally snowing. CAG paddles was.
This is a good deal bag X right there. Wow.
Oh yeah. CAG paddles was Sarge Slaughter, who flew with 213 on that last cruise as department head, who just relinquished command of the Lincoln, great American. But he comes into to Ready Room 8, who CAG was sitting in our Ready Room, and said, CAG, we've got to knock off flight ops. We're going to kill somebody tonight. And CAG's response was, I don't give an F if those MFers come aboard wet, if those MFers come aboard dry, but those MFers are going flying. Which didn't inspire a lot of confidence in young Lieutenant Roberts on the night, 0.8 airborne respot. So get out there, man up my F-14A Tomcat, dark night, and you can't see anything through the snow on the deck. And turn all the systems on. I'm flying with Opie Spencer in the backseat. We're finally about ready, for final checks. I'm like, anything broken back there? He's like, no. Anything broken up there? No. Should I give him the signal to break us down? He's like, I guess. So Yellowshire comes over, breaks us down. Yeah, I guess we're okay. And it was the most difficult thing ever, just to taxi that thing up forward, because the bow would go up and you start sliding backwards on the flight deck. The bow would go down, you're slamming on the brakes as hard as you could as you're skidding forward, and just happened to be with the brakes fully locked, skid forward and got into the shuttle finally. Yeah, I'm looking at my Reader F-14A HUD, and all I can see is about plus or minus 10 degrees on that HUD, pitching up and down. And the deck goes from, and we're both like, there's no way they're going to watch this. They're going to come to their senses, and they're not going to do it. We're done. And the next thing I see is that green bow light. I'm like, huh. And then Yellowshire's getting tension. I'm like, I should probably do something here. Yeah, so bring the power up.
There's something I'm supposed to be doing in this cockpit. What is that?
On the ICS, after bring the power up, I'm like, is there anything broken back there? No. Anything broken up there? No. I'm like, do I turn the lights on? He's like, I guess. So,
wow.
Turn the lights on, and I remember, as I'm looking at that, I'm pointed, right as the cat stroke goes, about 10 degrees down on the bow on the indicator, and I'm like, well, man, I really hope they timed this on the upswing, which sure enough they did. Go launching right into the snow, don't see anything, very uneventful flight until I'm coming back to land, and you can't see anything through the snow for a long time. Then it kind of opens up briefly, and then you see that unmistakable look of the postage stamp, at night, but the postage stamp is very, very flat in attitude as the ramp is all the way up. I'm like, well, that doesn't look good. Then you can't see anything through the snow. And then, snow kind of clears again. And then the landing area now looks vertical as the bow's all the way up and the round is all the way down. And I just started laughing out loud, and Hoopy's like, what's up? I'm like, what am I doing with my life, man? He's like, just land the plane, dude.
Man, we have all had this exact experience, and it's resonating because I lived this the same moment as you, where you go, is anything broken? And my buddy would say to me, well, there's a survival knife sticking out of my ADI, so I don't think I can go now. Yeah. But and then you go down that launch and that same thing. How the heck did I get here?
Yeah,
this is my whole life.
That was the actual dialogue. What am I doing in my life? Just land the plane, dude.
Yeah, just land the plane.
So fortunately, and it was not through any skill of my own. Sarge Slaughter talked me in and got a around the first pass on that one. But the average number of passes I do recall from that night was 7 attempts. We had one guy go around 9 times. And they just kept launching the S3 on bucket brigade after bucket brigade. Just to finally get everybody back on deck. But that was one of the more eventful ones from the cockpit side. From the platform side, I mentioned earlier during the pre-op here, waved one ejection, which was a really interesting one. My roommate, this is the OEF cruise on Stennis right after 9/11. Dark side of Pinky, guys are coming back from the beach, and it's my roommate coming down. Traps on the 3-wire, looks pretty good. And it's just the dark side of Pinky, and I do the also cardinal sin of turning away as I'm doing the non-skid facial from everything get kicked up on the flight deck. And something all of a sudden doesn't sound right, and turn back around. I'm like, they're not stopping anymore. That's not quite right. Seeing them continue to go forward, but a very slow airspeed. And I remember vividly, and this is kind of when the time compression set in. I'm actually saying eject on the radio, and all I hear is side tone because somebody's overriding me because there's a hierarchy for the radios on the LSO platform. So somebody was talking over me, but I do remember saying those words, and it's the only time I've ever said it. Next thing you see is this Tomcat disappears below flight deck off the front end there, and now time compression really sets in. I'm like, well, they're dead. The next thing I see is 2 seats going up with the rocket motor underneath, clear as day, glowing. Then you see 2 chutes open up off the angle deck there. They start coming down. Well, that's good. Then you see this F-14A appear from below flight deck in full afterburner and start climbing straight up. So the airplane had gotten down in ground effect. My roommate had actually ejected with his hands still on the stick and throttles. The RIA punched him out somewhere around 10 feet off the deck there. Yeah, so just between ground effect and the airplane being a couple thousand pounds lighter without a canopy and all that, it goes flying away. So I remember running over the port side of the ship as they were going along the wake on the left side there, looking down. You can see them; they're looking up at us. Then I look up, and now there's this F-14A stalled out and verted directly above the ship. Well, is that going to hit left? Is that going to hit right?
Oh,
no. It's going to hit left. And I start yelling, get below, because I was a team lead. And I'm staring at it for a couple seconds. Yep, it's going to hit left. And I just start running across the landing area as it lawn darts right next to the smoking sponson. So guys actually got wet in the smoking sponson from the splash on that one.
Wow.
Okay, cool. And then I run back over, and the next thing you hear on the radio is wave off, foul deck. To the Sarge Slaughter, who's now in the Tomcat coming down now on the next one. We go out there, and there's just half the tail hook sitting there in the landing area on the 3-wire. It had just broken in half through metal and Brooklyn. It was a brand new tail hook. They had gone through rework at NADEP North Island, and they were using a local procedure with sodium ions for buffing that was not authorized. And it turns out that makes Tomcat tail hooks as brittle as chalk. So it just snapped in half right on that first trap on it.
Oh, that was its actual first trap?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So, but you didn't know that at the time, right? I mean, there's no way of knowing that that all those tail hooks were bad, or how many other jets had them on.
It red striped the fleet very, very briefly. So they kind of came back really quickly. Obviously, we're flying combat ops and doing OEF, so we had to get back into doing the real work. But when they figured out there was something wrong with those tail hooks, they kind of looked at the batch of what's good, what's already been trapped, what's not been reworked. I don't remember all the processes with all that, but I know that we very quickly isolated amongst the fleet which tail hooks had been red striped for that, and we got back into business.
Well, they make those red striped ones make for good decorations in somebody's bar somewhere, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think he still has the hook point from that one. Rob Woods, which you call him.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a shameful way to lose an airplane, and luckily they didn't lose any people. It's terrible.
Nope. It may be. Well, it's not legendary. It's true. I think the admiral invited them back to his quarters later that night, and there may have been some medicinal brandy in the room. We're like, where have you been?
Yeah.
for
Wow.
medicinal uses. I mean, you got to calm people down, right? So
I'm sorry, sir, but I'll do just about anything for promotion, but this is a little too far.
Yeah. That was actually he was a good striker, Admiral. There's another story I know that got passed on to you guys where he was pretty awesome.
Who was that?
I can picture his face. I can't remember his name.
It's like that sometimes.
Yeah.
Admiral. There we go. Yeah. Admiral. He was a good one.
Yeah.
Hey, RJ. Okay, I know I've heard the story of your call sign, but can we tell a PG version of it? Maybe PG-13 version of it.
It's a pretty PG story. I mean, I had to explain to my grandma how I got the call sign rim job, which survived both the great call sign purges of 2012 and 2016.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So my first fleet catapult shot at night in VF-211, brand new guy. I've just checked in. So I've done part of air wing found and rating on Com2X. I've been sitting on Cat 1 for about 45 minutes. And legs got kind of tired of holding the brake, so I decided to set the parking brake. And this is my first night flight with the MVG modded lights. So usually the Tomcats I'd flown had a big red brake light up there next to the heads-up display, or lack thereof, but up there off the canopy bow. So it's not a small yellow light now. So turns out if you still have the parking brake set when you go down the catapult, you're going to go flying. You're just not going to have any rubber left on your tires when you go. So remember going down the cat stroke, and that's when the first bang hit not that long after and skid about 45 degrees off axis from the catapult. Then the left one goes spinning about 45 degrees off the other way. And I'm like, well, this is how I die. This sucks. Managed to get airborne, to which the air boss very quickly thereafter, my Rio first said, like, tell me you didn't have the parking brake set. I didn't have the parking brake set.
This is a senior Rio, I'm assuming.
It was, yeah. Chunks McKee. He was our opso at the time. So air boss comes up. Hey, 103. Yeah, you lift all the rubber from your tires on my flight deck and knocked down a bunch of my chiefs and flight deck crew and all that. So why don't you hold overhead while we figure out what we're going to do with you?
Yeah.
So hold overhead for about an hour. Finally getting pretty low. Visual inspection. There's no rubber left on the tires at all. So after a really long period of time, they're like, hey, your signal's converted North Island. I'm in dirty bingo, and I'm way low on gas now. So barely make it to towards North Island with enough gas. I'm calling for an LSO on station. Our LSO is actually at the I-bar, so he did not get the word. So fly a visual straight in there, dog leg off from the Coronado Hotel, and did a flying arrestment there on the wire on that runway. Managed to catch it on the fly, which was good, but it was a pretty violent pullout, and it actually fused the rims into the runway. So that Tomcat was there stuck on the runway for a little bit of time. So,
I forgot that part. I totally forgot that part.
Call back to hi, I'm the new guy. Call back to the ship. Hey, skipper, I'm sorry I broke the jet. He's like, that's okay. We got 104 there. How about you bring it out? And I'm like, all I can think is I want to go to the I-bar and, drink my sorrows away. Yeah, I'll bring it out tomorrow. No, we're going to keep the deck open for you.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, this is after midnight. So
talk about getting back up on the horse. Wow.
Yeah, so
I can see it already. Mishap Pilot had already blown tires when CAG instructed him to bring another airplane to the carrier.
Yeah. So,
what could go wrong?
Air wing reduction program.
Get off the coast, check in with Strike, and they're like, signal buster. Oh, this is great. So I'm 1.2 heading to Marshall, with 7.5 literally.
Yeah.
Finally decelling somewhere on final bearing and flew the absolute worst pass of my life. I mean, to this day I'll say it was the worst pass. Power come left. There's just a face full of island right in front of me. Slammed into the one wire, just absolute terrible pass. Paddles didn't even debrief. And it's after 2:00 in the morning because the ship had stayed out there just for young Lieutenant Roberts to bring that second Tomcat back out. So come down to the ready room, and there's nobody there to greet me, but there's 30 call signs up on the whiteboard. The rim job was circled up there, and it was the birth of the call sign. It was fun. I got some mileage out of it when I was an Admiral's aide, and the Admiral was like, hey, this is my aide, Lieutenant Commander Arms. Hi, Admiral, I'm rim job.
Yeah.
So
From the Tomcat community, you got to think that rim job means something else. I mean, I'm sorry, but yeah.
Well, I'm a San Francisco kid as well, so yeah. Double entendres.
No worries. I don't think I've ever heard too many call center review boards where the subject in question wasn't present to observe and be needled by the whole thing. So you probably missed a pretty enjoyable call center review board.
Oh, I've heard stories that it was quite enjoyable. Looking at all the ones that were up there were pretty. There were some pretty epic ones. So, yeah.
That's good stuff. Tell me so when we got out. Heading out on 05 cruise, we knew it was going to be the last Tomcat cruise, and there was like all the media around, and you remember how that was when like it seemed like every day a new media guy showed up, and you're like, okay, I'm going to be waving, and you didn't think you were going to be flying box hops. So, how did that transpire that changed, that story changed?
One, actually, I wasn't even slated to come to you guys. I'd been slated to go to CAG 1. And I was fixing the first Super Hornet transition CAG paddles. I was there for about a day, and they had to change a command. And the CAG was a Hawkeye guy, and he's like, I don't want to point nose guy. I'm gonna get rid of RJ. So I got fired on day 2 of my CAG job there at CAG 1. So at that point, the DCAG, who's a great guy, is like, hey, let me go introduce you to.
He was a good dude.
Yeah. Let me go introduce you to one of the other CAGs down the way. DCAGs. So he took me down to go interview with Sizemore, and we clicked pretty well. So Size and Lucas hired me on the spot. So ended up starting that cruise with not knowing it was fully going to be the sundown, but got there right about the time they announced, hey, everything else is going away. This is going to be the last Tomcat cruise. I was like, well, this is epic. I'm going to be kind of part of history with all of that. So. Did the workups with you guys, and then there was certainly a lot of the shenanigans in terms of all the media attention and all that. There's another little small documentary that was filmed. I remember when we were out there, Speed and Angels.
Yeah.
That was on the platform a lot, but I actually try to step out of the field of view for most of that. My other CAG paddles, who actually hated the Tomcat. Always wanted to insert himself into all that video. So if you watch Speed and Angels, you won't see me much other than a little bit of the back of my head. But yeah, the other CAG paddles got a lot more involved in that one, even though he was a hater.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah. I do remember that because whenever we walked into the ready room, everyone was like, hiss,
Yeah. One of the stars of that documentary was my biggest challenge on that deployment.
Yeah, I remember. Let's leave it at that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when we first went over the beach, do you remember who you flew with? I mean, I know we flew a decent amount together. Do you remember who your first greening flight was? Okay, green ink.
Actually, it was in 213. And I think I flew with Opie Spencer for my first one on that one because as a CAG staffer, you're kind of an unknown commodity. To some degree, so like they're going to kind of pair you up with the senior guys until they kind of fill you out, and then after that, I was mostly exclusively flying with the Nugget guys, which was awesome.
Yeah, that was good stuff.
It was even better, when I got paired up with a couple guys. This is their first time in country, because it certainly wasn't my first rodeo. I'd seen some flak rounds go off near my jet over Iraq. I'd had my fair share of OEF and all the stuff that was going on with that one. That was a relatively benign deployment in terms of the kinetic side of it. But, it was still a great cruise nonetheless.
Yeah. I mentioned green ink. Of course, green ink is what we mean in the logbook when we have an over-the-beach flight, so into the combat area. Yeah. How many flights did you end up getting?
I had total in my logbook, I think 110 green ink flights.
Wow. There you go. True warrior.
Actually, I call myself more the State Farm of the Navy. I've seen a thing or two.
Yeah, there you go.
No thing or two because I've seen a thing or two.
Yeah.
Or Farmers Insurance. That's what it is. Sorry.
Yeah, whatever. We got the reference. That's all right.
Yeah.
So and then at the end of it all, we were doing some pretty epic work. Did you end up dropping any ordnance while we were over there?
No, that was one of the few deployments where I did not go kinetic.
We had a decent amount. I think probably about half the guys in the squadron did. I didn't either, actually. I had about 2 or 3 times when it was looking pretty likely, but it didn't end up happening, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But
I do recall I was on the Admiral's wing a lot of time, and every time a tick broke out, we got sent somewhere else. Because I think that they were a little nervous at the Admiral. If it got screwed up, it was not going to reflect well.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, I mean, a lot of shows of force. But yeah, I mean, that was it was just a different kind of cruise, just based on what was going on in country at the time. It was just not a highly kinetic deployment.
It was truly not. And then, of course, to see Mosul from the air, it's the best view of Mosul ever, right? So
yeah, I did get I had one show of force where I was looking up at the top of the buildings in Mosul, and some guys in a convoy were getting ganged up on by a bunch of locals, and it looked like it was going to get pretty bad. So they actually wanted us down below building level.
Mm-hmm.
So
a couple of those ones were doing super low passes, super fast, probably about 1.1 or something like that, right?
It was low and fast. I don't think I was fully supersonic because again I was going down a main city street.
Oh, okay, yeah. Gotcha, yeah. It's a little too close. Right?
It literally was below building level too. It was just one of those ones.
Yeah. So you, I was going to let Leekster probably kind of take over this portion because obviously I'm not an LSO, but your career was pretty well defined by your LSO time. So after going CAG paddles, you ended up at the schoolhouse for a while, right?
Yeah, actually, my JO after my JO tour, my instructor tour was I was actually at the LSO school as an instructor, and got a CAG paddles job after that, and then did my sunset tour at the LSO school. So being a paddles, it started out. It was a very personal thing for me. So going through flight school, my roommate and best friend actually got killed landing on the Kennedy. Same day I qualified and got my wings, which was kind of a fundamentally changing experience. So I vowed that something like that was never going to happen to a friend of mine again. So I took that side of the job very, very seriously. So I remember in the end of my checkmate days, my skipper's like, "All right, hey, you're my number one JO. Where do you want to go?" I'm like, "Well, I want to go to the LSO school." "Okay, well, you're not my number one JO anymore. Go to Top Gun, go to the RAG. You got two choices: walk out of here with the fit rep or walk out of here with the orders." And I chose the orders because that's where my heart was. And it worked out great because then I got to go on, get a CAG paddles job. And then, to be able to come back as an 05, obviously every deployment I've ever done on all 6 of them, every old timer day I was up there. And in fact, my last deployment as an 05, during my CDD when I was on the Admiral staff and still flying, I found out I got to work LSO school. So I'm an 05 that they put on a wave team as like a JO. So every 4 days I was up
You're in a regular rotation.
Yeah, doing a regular rotation. It was fantastic.
We should discuss a little background maybe on landing signal officers, and I don't think a lot of people are really familiar with the exactly what it all means, and the truth is where it comes from is in naval aviation, if you can't land on a ship, then you could be the best dogfighting guy, the best bomb dropper, whatever you're good at in an airplane. But if you can't land on the ship, then you're not going to continue as a naval aviator. And that goes, all the way back to the beginning of naval aviation off of aircraft carriers, where there was a landing signal officer back there that's helping the pilot through signaling to him if he's above glide slope or on lineup in the right place, when the airplane's in the right position to grab a wire safely. And those the old school pictures you see of guys with the paddles holding these ping pong like paddles out and moving them up and down, and then when the airplane gets close to landing, you'll see him cross his arms quickly, which means cut, when they would pull the power to land in the wires. And then later on, we transitioned to the Fresnel lens technology. So the history of LSOs goes way back, and World War II was a big deal. And then we started flying at night. They had lighted suits, and you can find all kinds of cool pictures and videos on the internet of paddles. And it created its own kind of culture in naval aviation. Inside of that, early on in World War II, they even had LSOs, believe it or not, that were not pilots. And I met this guy one time at the Oak Club at Oceana. I had seen him on the cover of Hook magazine. He had this very distinctive mustache, and I went and talked to the guy, and I said, he later became a pilot, but he was telling me how in his story about these LSOs that were not pilots. And I said, that's really weird. How can you have somebody who's not a pilot telling a guy how to land on a ship, and even more so grading his landing? And he goes, well, we had a saying back in those days is you don't have to be a dog to judge a dog show. And I thought that was the greatest saying, right? And it's true that, all of us that were landing signal officers, we all chose it for our own reasons. I like the cult of the LSO, meaning the personalities of the LSOs that I worked with. But I also had this deep-seated fear of the night in the barrel, that night of, hey, I can't get aboard, and knowing that landing on that ship is extremely hazardous. And so being up there on the LSO platform with those guys, watching landings day after day, improved my flying skills. I think it made me a better carrier pilot to be talking about it and being around it all the time. And the career path of LSOs is such that you can choose, like RJ was saying, you can go to Top Gun, you can go to the RAG, and maybe that's going to help your career to be a squadron commander. But choosing to be an LSO, and especially going to CAG paddles, makes it a little more difficult, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe you can talk a little bit more about that, RJ, because you made that decision.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I mean, for everybody who's ever been, behind the back of the ship, at night, on those dark, scary nights, there's nothing like that voice of God, literally the voice of God coming up there. And it's like, hey, it's nothing but a thing. I'm going to get you through. And, they're just like doctor bedside manners. There's great radio voices and there's not so great radio voices. But, there's a difference between being an LSO and being a paddles. Those that are truly the paddles, those are the guys who really got in tune with what was going on in your cockpit. Even if they weren't from that type model series, they could have been an S3 guy or a Prowler guy. The best paddles I ever had was an S3 guy. And he, our squadron loved him so much. Our skipper made him a Tomcat guy. But just that voice coming up, okay, I know I'm going to get through this now. So just like you're talking about, that cult of that, I naturally gravitated to, going through flight school. The guys that really spend a lot of time with you as we're going through that most critical phase of all flight school, carrier qualification, those are the guys who spend a lot of one-on-one time with you. And part of it's, debriefing at the bar over beer afterwards and all that. It's like, those are the guys I want to be like. And then, my first squadron, everybody remembers their CAG paddles. There's 2 of them on every ship. You don't remember necessarily every single person in the air wing, but as a pilot, you certainly remember exactly who your CAG paddles were. And I remember every one of my deployments, because you're seeing them every day that you're flying. And you've had, everybody's had those bad days out there where you really needed those guys. And a good paddles, can judge not just the energy state of the aircraft, but all those, uncorrelatable things in terms of what's going on with winds, what's going on with the deck, and be able to somehow, magically guide that aircraft in that right sky, get yourself into that cone of acceptability when, the odds are against it being a successful outcome. So there's something, almost godlike and mythical about it that, I loved when I was a JO, and I'm like, that's exactly what I want to do. And that's the career path I want to go on. I want to be one of those guys. And again, my backstory with, what happened to my flight school roommates, like that, to me, it's like, I don't ever want something like that to happen in front of mine again. So not only did I gravitate to it, it had a personal note for me.
I felt the exact same way. CHIMPO, did you have that experience when you were learning, when you started going through flight school, that your LSOs had that impression on you, or was it something you just fell into later?
No, it was literally the impression that they had on me. It was very similar to what RJ said. It was the LSOs at the RAG, VAW 120, when I was going through. And I might have explained it before, but when I was in T-45s, honestly, I didn't really know what an LSO was. Obviously, we were assigned some LSOs for our class. And at the time, honestly, all I knew was that, they were instructors, and I just figured they were guys that were picked to, teach us how to land on the ship. But once I got to the RAG, there was just a certain group of guys that were always hanging out, seemed to have the most fun. The guys that I kind of gravitated towards, especially, being a pretty extroverted guy, I was just like, there's just something about this group of dudes that is really neat. And, as time went on and I was there, I was like, oh, this is like an entire community of people. And it was the LSOs that, the RAG LSOs, RAG paddles at the Hawkeye Squadron. And so when I checked out of VAW 120 to head out to CAG 9, VAW 112, going right on deployment with the Stennis, the XO at the time had sat me down and asked me if I had any goals, for my first squadron. I told him I absolutely did. And one was to fly 1,000 hours, which was easy with 2 back-to-back 8-month deployments that were ahead of me. The next one was to be nominated as an LSO as soon as possible. And that actually worked out in my favor very quickly, especially since we were going on cruise so quick. I checked in and we were on Com2X like 3 weeks later. And by the beginning of that deployment, I was already nominated LSO. And then the last was to come back as an instructor at the RAG as one of the LSOs, because they were the guys that I looked up to the most in all of flight school. And, I was in the VTs, it was obviously it's a lot of work, but like the vibe was just off. And I was like, kind of what RJ was talking about on the runway with the F-14 Alpha, like that, it was a little underwhelming. And I was like, I thought this was supposed to be like super cool, and it was neat, but it wasn't until I got to the RAG where I was like, oh, wait a second. No, this is what I signed up for. This is what I'm here for. So, from then on, it just became my absolute favorite community to be a part of. Obviously I love the Hawkeye. I've told you guys that before. And, there's a lot of camaraderie there, but, to be on the LSO platform, it's the greatest job in the entire world. And, learning from guys like RJ, I mean, you have a half a conversation with the guy and you realize how awesome he is. And he was the incoming LSO schoolhouse. I literally have him saved in my phone as RJ Senior Cognizant LSO. Because anytime you'd get an email from him, it would be like very respectfully, Commander Brian RJ Roberts, Senior Cognizant LSO U.S. Navy. And I was like, that is like the epitome. Like, my God, this guy has made it. Like, that's what I looked up to.
Did you realize I had that in there as a joke, right?
Right.
No, I know, but it was true though. I mean, it was to top you. We, and to this day, I mean, there are every single pilot to this day, the guys on the Truman, every boat that is out right now, the pilots that are coming down are still being affected by everything that RJ taught us, because it's the senior guys or the CAG paddles are still products of either guys that RJ taught directly or the guys that taught them. And, he's been known as the godfather of the LSO platform for years now. And, I'm just super lucky to have him as a mentor, because
that's only because I was at the LSO school for 4 straight years.
Yeah.
the longest tour in history of that institution.
Yeah.
Wow. That is the place that sets the tone, right? And exactly. There's a few pieces of insight to the landing signal officer culture that I think made impressions on me. One was the bottle bet. And I don't know if they do this anymore, but in the old days, when you went to the carrier,
yeah,
I'm sure you do. So, and that's why I'm bringing this up. And in the old days we had, and I'm sure they still have it in some form or another, but we would have a loaded bet that you would make with a landing signal officer as a student, based on your grades and boarding rate, et cetera. And you were certain to lose this bet. So you had to buy the LSO a bottle at the end when you carrier qualified as a student. And you're perfectly happy to buy that bottle because you got through something together and you knew that he was on your side to get you through that. And so when you bought that bottle for the LSO, you were handing it over to somebody that you respected and had helped you achieve a what at some point seemed like a really difficult thing to get through. So yeah, there's that. And then the LSO school, when you are selected to be a landing signal officer and you would go to the LSO school in Oceana, there was a cultural tone set at that school that went through and through the community that I saw. Didn't matter what LSO you ever met, wherever you went in the Navy, everybody had this same culture, and it was one of levity It was one of brotherhood. It was a caring culture that we cared about each other and getting pilots aboard the ship safely and getting them to be better pilots. And I saw that my entire career, and I believe that's still the same. I'm sure that's RJ is probably the guy who set that tone too. When he was
when I went through the LSO school in 1999, and that's exactly what I saw. And that's exactly what I want to do for my instructor corps. So coming out of my fleet squadron, that's why I wanted to go do that, because of exactly that tone and that mentality. Like, this is where I want to be part of. Because of that, it's a culture of, yeah, we can show these videos of these ramp strikes and all these scary vision passes out there, but how do we learn from that? More importantly, how do we prevent that from happening to our friends that we're out there, spending these 6, 8, 10 months with, and then the camaraderie that's fostered by that community. And it is, there's a cult-like quality to it, that gang of street rats in the white flight coats up there, when you're up there on the platform for, hours on end, giving up flight time, because you're flying less than your squadron mates, you're still happy, even when it's raining, snowing out there. There's something, because what you're doing, ultimately matters.
Well, you had to have a good sense of humor too. I very rarely, if ever, met an LSO that didn't have an amazing sense of humor and could tell a joke. And that was a requirement when I was a training LSO with my classes. We would tell a joke on the first day of carrier qual class. Okay, each LSO would tell a joke. We say, guys, coming in tomorrow, starting for the next 10 days during FCLPs, every day when we show up here, one of you guys is going to tell a joke, and it better be good.
Well, Chimpo knows that was the ROE when I was at the schoolhouse. Was okay, it's an RJ lecture, right? Who's got the joke to warm up the class? If it wasn't a good one, there's going to be a little bit of ridiculing, and then I'd have to dig deep into my non-dad jokes, to come up with something
right.
Relatable and appropriate.
The Bloody Mary bar would take care of the jokes if it didn't.
So I want to admit something to you guys as a Rio that you probably won't hear many Rios admit, and that is that Rios. Okay, I don't want to speak for all Rios. I will speak for this Rio, and I know there are some definitely agree with me. There are Rios out there who wish that there is something like that, something like the LSO community for Rios, because it just doesn't exist. And there's a little bit of LSO envy. I don't know if you remember this, RJ, but there was a time. I think we were flying. I think you and I had flown, and then you were waving the next day, and you're like, "Hey, you should come out to the platform with me, or something like that." I'm like, "Well, I'm flying actually." So, but then I did come out that night, and you talked me through the whole thing. I was like, "Man, this is absolutely fascinating." I mean, I'd been out to the platform before, but I hadn't really gotten a real good fam on it. And there is something to be said for that camaraderie, as you guys are talking about, that just unfortunately just isn't open to the Rio or now the Wizzos in the community. So you guys are fortunate to have that experience. I'll tell you that.
The other side of it, and I know Chimpo and RJ will totally agree with me on this, is that when you're an LSO on the ship, you get to go to every ready room. So you get to know every single pilot on that boat, and you start to feel comfortable with these guys that even if you go to mid-rats, you see one of those guys, you're like, I know that dude. You sit down and chat with them, and you talk about how dark it was that night or whatever. And that was one thing that was kind of a requirement as an LSO, is that you needed to be somewhat social. You had to have good social graces, that you could go and chat with guys from other communities, and it wasn't a parochial thing at all. You're like, man, that was awesome when you came into the break today at 500 knots. That was fantastic, and but the pass wasn't so great at the end.
Yeah.
But
hey, epic break.
The air show.
Epic break is that covers a lot of sins, right? So
you're absolutely right, though. I mean,
Not all, a lot.
no, just a lot.
But especially as a junior guy showing up 3 weeks before Com2X, I mean, halfway through that first deployment, I knew every pilot by name, call sign. You start to figure out how they fly, who's cool, who's not. So every time you're walking to your squadron's table in mid-rats, you stop at 4 or 5 tables on the way and like, what up, Lloyd? What up, G-Funk? Like you're just seeing these guys, and it gets you, involved with the air wing in a way that I think would be hard to get otherwise, because just like you said, Leek, so you're in every ready room on every walkthrough, and you start to figure it out quickly, and that transcends. I mean, it's RJ's talking about his CAG paddle, Sarge Slaughter. He was the captain of the Lincoln when I was out there. Then I met him in CATSI one night when he was PCO, right before the change of command, halfway through that deployment we had, and figured out who he was. I was just in there on CATSI duty or whatever, because we had some guys coming down, and started talking to him. And he said that he spent most of his time flying Tomcats, and I was like, oh wow, like RJ is one of my favorite people in the world and a Tomcat pilot, so he's the first name drop I had. And so I said to him, I was like, hey sir, RJ Roberts, he was a Tomcat guy, former CAG paddles, and he's like, are you kidding? That guy, I'm married because of that guy. And from then on,
true story.
Like in CATSI on the Lincoln in the North Arabian Sea, and from then on, I let him into every single break that he flew on, because he flew a lot. And so I've literally had pictures of me flying a Hawkeye into the break with him flying the tanker on my wing. And so it transcends. It's just one of those bonds that once you stare down the barrel of a super dark night from both the cockpit and from the platform, it's just, you can speak a language that most people would never understand, and it's something that I'll be thankful for every day of my life. And even that CAG paddle show, RJ was the architect of that. That he's the one that set me up to go out to Japan. I left my rag tour early to head straight out to sea because RJ liked me for the job, and I don't know, just the connections that you make in this job with guys that understand what it feels like to wear the platform, what it feels like to have the first headset, stepping 20 feet out into the LA on a super dark night, what it looks like to see a 28-foot swing with a guy at a quarter of a mile. It just, it puts you in a place that I think few people understand, but I'm just super thankful to have that, because it makes a connection that I think is good for a lot of people.
So
there's also the undeniable perk of people tend to buy you a lot of drinks in port.
Yeah. Yeah, I was
paddles.
I was
Thanks,
popular
paddles.
in Japan.
It's the two greatest words in all of naval aviation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was popular in Japan, not because I was a popular guy, but guys cared about their GPA, so I didn't mind riding that wave for a little while.
So one last one more item here on the list with the whole landing signal officer thing is, RJ, you have seen a tremendous change in technology associated with landing on the carrier in your career. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about what you've seen over the years.
Like I said, I guess the farmer's insurance seen it, a thing or two, because I've seen it, a thing or two. Having waved scary passes, in the F-14A, I remember we got 3 brand new guys out of the RAG right after 9/11. And one guy, nearly flew into the water at the back of the ship, one night, and I couldn't even talk him aboard. And the skipper's like, what do you want to do with him? Well, let's take this guy, and let's just send that guy home, because we're going straight on cruise right after that. And he's like, we're going to war. I can't take an unreliable commodity. That kind of, as a head squadron LSO, to have a skipper say, are we taking this guy with us on deployment, and having that faith and confidence in you was a huge deal. But seeing these, archaic airplanes, even compared to the fleet at the time, and flying them and still loving them, and then even ramping up into my, to the next, set of orders where I'm, flying the F-14D, which is a beast of an airplane, great to land aboard the ship. And then, I've got to fly the Super Hornet and the regular Hornet aboard the ship as well. And then, like I said, I was able to wave everything from F-14A. So I waved F-14As, S3s, EA6s, you named it, all the legacy platforms, which made you a better LSO, because every airplane is different. You learned all the nuances of them, and that made you a better landing signal officer by learning how each one of those airplanes had that different little characteristic of how to fly it well or get it aboard, or how you could help that pilot, better get aboard with all that.
Just a quick side note, since this is the F-14 Tomcat radio show.
Yeah.
The F-14, the F-14, when I went through the RAG in 89, I think it was, our disqual rate was somewhere around 25%. It was a pretty high.
Are you serious?
Oh yeah.
Oh
yeah.
wow.
It was about the same when I went through too.
So we had folks that were. I remember one guy I went through with had finished in the top of his training command class. One of those rock stars, and he just couldn't land the F-14 on the ship. I think he disqualified twice, and they gave him a third chance, and he qualified. And then he went out to the fleet and had a hook slap like in the first month, and then they just said, okay, that's enough. So it's not the F-14 was an extremely difficult airplane to land on a ship. And so where I was going with that whole side note is that not just a difference in airplane technology, but a difference in the actual landing reference technology as far as the lens and lineup stuff. You've seen changes in that as well that has increased safety, right? Am I right?
Oh, absolutely. And actually, the closest to the pin award I ever had for an airplane waving it was an F-14 on that. It was F-14D on that last Tomcat cruise. It was a guy who had a combined hide failure. So with that, you had none of the main flaps. You just had the aux flaps and no DLC. And he started going high, and they gave him the easy with it. It was Crash Bairdell, and he gave me all the easy with it and just cut him back all the way to idle. That hook hit maybe 3 inches past the round down.
Oh, dude.
On that one, it's like, wow. Okay, well, he listened to me with the easy with it. That on the pickle, that was my closest to the pin. But getting into what's changed, since all that, so it was a great time to come back as an 05 for my Sunset Tour and get a wave, all the new things as things were changing. So circa 2015, there was a program that they were calling Magic Carpet at the time, which NavAir pitched to the Admirals, and the Admirals thought, this is awesome, which is funny. It actually harkens back to the Tomcat because what they brought back was DLC. So, Tomcat.
Yeah, heard guys talk about that.
Yeah, was the direct DLC being direct lift control. So you're kind of changing the fact that you're not flying on a power curve anymore. You can go up or down instantaneously by killing or gaining a little bit of lift, which makes things a lot more responsive and a lot easier to control rather than lagging. I've got to add power, I got to wait for power to catch up, and now glide slope gets changed. DLC in the Tomcat, especially on the high side, you can kill some lift really quickly without actually killing any of the energy state of the Tomcat, and that was one of its greatest assets and what I love most about that airplane. So with the Super Hornet and the F-35, we can do DLC again. They just incorporate it into the entire wing, so now the entire wing surface moves. So what is old is new again, and we took this technology that we had in Tomcats and S3s, and then now bring it back to these, the new hotness airplanes, which fundamentally changes how you land aboard the ship. So you're no longer, again, flying on a power curve, you're flying on a lift curve, and it's an instantaneous response. And not only that, there's two modes of it. One is kind of like flying like auto throttles, but instead of the power, it's really just changing the lift of the wing. The other one is you see a center ball and you hit nose wheel steering on the stick, and the jet says, cool, I don't know where I am, but you're telling me this is on glide slope. You're programmed in, hey, it's a 3.5 degree glide path, and the ship is doing 15 knots because that's what you're telling me it's doing, which is all changeable. Cool, I'm going to hold this wire for you. Oh, you didn't like that burble, that little settle effect from the wind out there? Tell you what, I'm going to add some power for you and give you all the lift and go down even past the normal stops for the flap position. Oh, you didn't want that rooster tail? I'm going to kill a little lift for you. So it compensates through all that, and it basically holds you on a wire. So, and it does the Kentucky windage for you. The ship is moving, so it's holding you on that 15 knot forward moving 3.5 degree glide path. It's pretty amazing. And talking when we had 25% disqual rate in the Tomcat, now it's basically a 99% boarding rate overall for the fleet. I mean, guys are getting aboard every single time. There are some disquals. I waved the first F-35 cut pass. So they've got that there too. Because every
nice
time
job.
got a bad pass on it. And as you saw from, obviously what made it out in the media with the F-35, nothing's infallible, which is why the LSO, in my opinion, is always going to have a job. Because even with all this new hotness, the deck is going to move around. Pilots are going to have slower scans. You're going to have worse nights than others. And it's a reactive ball flying game plan. So a guy who's behind on a scan or doesn't quite realize those deviations are coming, the difference between a perfect landing and crash are still only 12.5 feet in the vertical, 20 feet laterally, and 210 feet in the horizontal. And you can still have bad outcomes even in these great airplanes. But there's modal degradation, there's configuration degradation, there's all kinds of scenarios, barricades, whatever. Piece of it, which is huge, and that's the most difficult to gauge. And that's actually, I think, in my opinion, going back to the LSO centric side of this, that's truly what differentiates the LSO between the paddles. And a paddles knows that human piece. You know every single guy in that air wing, and you know what their trends are and what that pilot brings. And when you start seeing some of those subtle cues of, I know that guy's going to start going fast, and when he does that, he's going to cut some power back and he's going to fall out of the sky momentarily. You know what a guy's trends are before he even does it, knows that he's doing it himself. And that's what a really good paddles does. This new technology, I would say the flip side of it, while it is absolutely fantastic and is truly a game changer for how we land aboard the ship, and it is the greatest thing in terms of improving safety and efficiency. So I'm a huge fan and an advocate, and I think it is a fundamental game changer, equivalent to going from straight decks to angled decks.
I believe that there's people think it's so good that they're going to stop doing carrier qual in the training command and just do it at the RAG now.
That's going to happen, and I was involved in some of that studies.
Wow.
Yeah, that's already happened, and they already sent the first couple of guys out of T-45 straight to the RAG.
There's 30 guys who've got
wow.
wings. Yeah, right now there are 30 guys out there that have their wings who've never CQ'd in an airplane ever.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hey, let me fly with that guy.
Yeah.
Sorry. Did I say that out loud?
I had night for the first time,
Oh, right. Exactly.
Yeah, but while this technology is fantastic and it does make landing on the carrier infinitely easier. I mean, nighttime, no HUD now. You're like, cool, I see a center ball and I hit a button on the stick, and then, oh, it's a little low. I pull back on the stick a little bit. Oh, there's a center ball and I let go of the stick. You're making 1 to 2 corrections, rather than constant, infinite corrections for all those little intangible things that affect the outcome of every pass. But the flip side of it is it does, and I've seen it firsthand, can make for lazier pilots. It's like, hey, I'm just going to ride the lightning with this, and it'll get me aboard. So there's some of that over-reliance a little bit, or overconfidence in the capability and the technology. And it's also a reactive now game plan. Oh, I see deviation, I react to the deviation. Well, those deviations can still get pretty big pretty quick. And in the end game, when you got some moving deck or a slow scan, all those things can have an adverse effect. And I think there's been an effect on the LSOs too. And talking with the guys currently in charge of the LSO school, he agrees. And it's not any fault of their own, but they've waived nothing but Super Hornets. And now they've waived nothing but Super Hornets with these precision landing modes and F-35. So they've never seen all those outside of the box passes where, how do I get a guy who's so far out of whack and actually still get him back into that kind of acceptability and get him aboard? Guys just don't have that as much anymore because they haven't seen it.
Yeah, it's actually really analogous to the CRM concept of automation reliance, and we see that. We've seen that in combat. We've seen that in the increasing automation in the jet. I'm sure Leekster sees it in the transport world now. But it's coming into the LSL world now too. So
this is there's a whole bunch of interesting points that go along with the whole thing, and one that I always think of is people are afraid that the Chinese are going to be operating aircraft carriers, and I can tell you right now the Chinese are in for a world of growing pains.
Oh yeah,
we've been doing this in our Navy for 100 years, and we learned all this stuff the hard way.
Well, and we learned it with slower aircraft and much more forgiving aircraft. We learned it when we were going, 30 knot approaches or 40 knot approaches, whatever they were,
Well, it's interesting times too. We're getting drone tankers aboard our carriers here in the not too distant future, which I was lucky enough to wave the drone aboard. That was both cool and eerie, being on the pickle for an unmanned aircraft, landing on the ship.
Interesting.
But I would say the technology change that we've seen since when I started, it's a vast improvement over a lot of the things we've done, and the safety record does speak for it. But it's not a forgiving business, and as everybody's seen from that F-35 pass, things can go bad pretty quick. And I actually, listening to the audio for it, those LSOs were spot on with their power calls. The moment that deviation started to happen, they're already calling for the power and the wave off. So I don't honestly think that anything more could have done, but that's just how quick those deviations can go that far south.
And
even with that technology, there's only so much you can do.
Right.
RJ, I want to take it back. We got just probably a closeout question for you here. Take it back to the Tomcat community and the end of your time in the Tomcat. Tell me about just real briefly. Like, do you have a particular flight that stands out as your best Tomcat flight?
I wouldn't say it's my. Yes. I mean, it's one of those best of days, worst of days kind of things. So it was not the end of my Tomcat career. It was towards the end of my first JO deployment.
Oh, wow.
So this was, Operation Anaconda is going on, and we got woken up. I was supposed to have the early go. We got woken up even earlier saying, hey, you guys are going to be an alert launch, go in country. We got a CH-47 down on a mountainside. Okay, that's a rude awakening. So, go to Civic, get the brief, get the word that, hey, there's a SEAL, Petty Officer Oneill Roberts, who got knocked out of the back of a helo by an RPG. Another helo went in to go rescue him. That guy helo got shot down. So they were not going to send any further assets in the country, because this is a time when we did not have anything other than a couple soft teams on the ground. I mean, it was not a permissive environment where we owned all of Afghanistan. This was, some spooky shit, stuff, going on in country, and that was about it. So, obviously we're the Tomcats, so like, you guys launch first and go fast. And I remember I launched off the Cat, and we had a complete INS failure right off the Cat. The Rio I was flying with wanted to turn back. He was one of our more risk-averse department heads, but not a bad dude. But I'm like, no, we got guys in country, and the guy I was Dash 2. My lead was Lobes Sidbury, who's also a 31 alumni at 1.2.
Lobes, yeah.
Yeah. So Lobes was my lead at that point, and it's dawn in the daylight, and like, well, we're going that way, and I can see the really big mountains in the distance, so I'm pretty sure I don't need INS to go that direction. So we bust her as much fast as we can to get up in country, and we get way low on gas. And Lobes is calling for tanker to get on station to give us gas as we get overhead. And I'll never forget the check-in. Slick 01 was the guy's call sign. And the immediate check-in with the fact was, hey, there were 26 of us. There's 19 of us still alive. Can you keep us that way? Wow, okay, this is getting real. So Lobes put the first bomb down, and we're basically bingo. And we yo-yo back and forth to the tanker as I get another bomb down, which took out a mortar. But now we come back together, and with the INS failure, my lantern pod wasn't getting queuing, so we had to come up with buddy lays. Lobes at this point is now Winchester, and we get the call on the radio: expend all remaining ordnance on my position. We're being overrun.
Wow!
And you could hear all the machine gun fire. It was clearly not American, getting closer. So it was not an authorized tactic, but we said, okay, let's put everything down. I had 3 GBU-12s left. So we dropped all 3 on the friendlies at that point. And that was the longest, 20-second time to fall in the history of man. It was about the longest 10 seconds of dead radio silence after impact, until finally he comes back and is like, good hits, great effects. And none of the rest of the guys got shot at the rest of the day. We actually got a chance to meet those guys later on, which was huge in terms of the bro hugs to have been overhead and seen all that going on, and then getting a chance to meet the guys that actually lived through later. To get to the more epic side of the story, the whole time.
More epic side? That's like, are you kidding me? This is amazing. Wow.
The more epic side of it was we were told that we had to go back to the ship because we had to make our recovery time. And the KOC is saying, no, go back. Something's coming from the ship saying go back too. And Lobes is saying, get tanker overhead this mountain right now. Otherwise, you're going to have 2 Tomcats down this mountaintop alongside that CH-47. And we kept getting told, no, we're not extending you. We extended Lobes extended ourselves, and I concurred, heartily with doing so. No, we're not leaving guys on the ground because we got there so quickly. There was no other assets. So we're the only tier airplanes in country, essentially, that are providing the overhead for these guys that have been shot down.
Wow.
So there was nobody to rip us. So we're like, no, we're not leaving this position. There's going to be an aircraft overhead them at all times until you get a tanker over here. And we were told, nope, you're not going to get one. Finally, Lobes just said, turn your radio off. Sure enough, they sent a tanker our way. So we got gas before we flamed out. So other Hornets finally showed up behind us, and some F-16s finally did too. So we finally did get ripped by other assets with some ordnance. So, okay, now it's time to head back after we've extended ourselves well past, some general on the KOC saying, this is KOC actual, turn around and head back to the ship. And us disregarding that. So John C. Stennis turns in the wind just for our section of Tomcats. Come in. Lobes rips off a pretty good break, which he was good at it. we land for this recovery just for our 2 jets, and we're in the ready room, and CAG comes in, and now we're starting to just get ripped into by CAG about how dare us, because obviously CAG got ripped into by the KOC, about how dare us, as Tomcat jockeys and cowboys, disobeyed direct orders to return back to the ship, and we're just getting the ass cheating of a lifetime. And out of the back of the ready room, the admiral, the same one who might have had some medicinal brandy for my roommate who ejected on that cruise, comes in. It's like, hey, CAG, I got this one. Hey, nice job, boys. If you'd done anything differently, I would have kicked your ass. It's like,
there you go.
It's like,
fantastic.
All right, conversation was over. So that was probably my best worst day.
I can see it.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
That's one that stands out, in the archives. What I was a part of in the Tomcat. Lots
historic.
Of other great memories. Lots of other lots of other great memories. Especially in that last Tomcat cruise. Lots of memories I probably lost from some great port calls with all of it. Nothing quite as combat related as that.
No.
But the greatest feat of that was, though, both my first 2 Tomcat cruises, we lost a jet. Each one of my first 2 Tomcat cruises, that one we came back with every pilot, every jet,
everything.
As a CAG paddles, like that's all I wanted to start this cruise with, and that's what we ended it with.
Beautiful.
And then being out there to wave the last Tomcat pass ever, which was hands down definitely an okay underline.
No kidding.
Getting a chance to be out there to wave you guys for that last Tomcat pass. I mean, being a part of history. Being up on the LSO platform waving a Tomcat when Chuck Norris was on the LSO platform.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Awesome.
No.
Chuck Norris.
No. It's not that the Tomcat. He moves the carrier, so we get an okay underline.
Well, we had Sergei Fedorov out there too, on the LSO platform, and asking him a lot of questions about Anna Kournikova. Some great memories from all that time frame. Couldn't have asked for a better sunset for the Tomcat than that cruise. Great cruise. We had an awesome CAG, awesome BCAG, truly epic team out there, and just 2 of the greatest ready rooms I've ever been a part of. 213 was awesome in their way. You guys were awesome in your way.
In their way, yeah, exactly. I hear that.
But I flew with 26 different F-18 squadrons over my course of my career, and I still would say that those are 2 of the best ready rooms I was ever part of. I will say that my first cruise, especially, and even the second cruise in Checkmates, there's nothing like the first squadron. There never will be, and I'm sure you got those memories too. And I've seen some bad ready rooms, throughout the years, but those are some of the best ready rooms I've ever got. And that's honestly what makes for some of the best memories.
Well, thanks so much, RJ. It's been awesome to see you again, have you on the show. You guys are, you have shared some awesome stories with us, so we're going to have a great show to publish, I'm sure.
I'm just happy to be here and have a chance as an old guy to tell some of the stories.
I think we would definitely like to have you back and talk about adversary stuff too. I mean,
that'd be cool.
Something we've been wanting to do for a while, and it would be very interesting to get your take on the contract adversary world.
Yeah, I would love to. I can talk all day about LSO stuff, but there's a lot of other fun things out there. But yeah, it was a great, especially to have a guy like CHIMPO there, telling untrue stories about me and all
untrue.
That. Yeah, untrue.
Unsubstantiated, completely out of left field. Yeah.
But what a great tour to end on. Being in 05, amongst the sea of lieutenants and lieutenant commanders, still being up there on the platform waving. Couldn't ask for more from an old dude. So it was a great way to go out. I might have had another 2 years of obligated service to the Navy, after I was supposed to be done. But that's another story, and actually relates to bottle bets and an IG. So that might be another good topic for another day.
Cool, man.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again. It's been really awesome.
Been great talking to you.
Lorenzo?
Thanks, guys.
Yeah,
Great
awesome. Sorry, guys. Thank you. I'm in the back of the hangar here trying to install this Pratt & Whitney F-119 F-22 thrust vectoring engine in the back of this Tomcat for RJ and CHIMPO here. Got to get these guys the best, but, balling on a budget, though, so we got an iPad, Velcroed over the steam gauges, so you'll look good doing it, though. Don't worry. I promise.
The Kafir actually has a Israeli J79 F4 Phantom in it, motor, which is pretty fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing show, guys, and some amazing history, distinguished careers. The LSO platform brought to life, second to none. Just absolutely thank you from behalf of all of us, and just a special night. Thank you again, guys.
Appreciate it, guys. Good talking to you.
What are you waiting for?